Welcome everybody for the October OHP Bridge Advisory Committee meeting. Good to see everybody, or at least a lot of people, back again after a 3 month hiatus. I know that's a relatively new cadence. But before we kind of dive into today's session, which I think is going to be a good one, I do have some housekeeping items. So first thing I want to mention, closed captioning should be available to everyone who's attending today's meeting. If you need to access these, there should be a button at the bottom of the screen that says Show Captions. Click on that link and captions should begin to show up. Katie will also share these in the Zoom chat, so if you have any questions, you have to find it, please look in the chat. Questions and comments will be taken from OBAC members only, with the exception of the public testimony portion at the beginning of today's meeting. I just want to highlight that it's at the beginning. For folks that may be attending that attended some previous ones at the early iterations of our meetings, the public comment is moved to the front. If you're an OBAC member and would like to speak, please raise your hand before doing so. The Zoom chat feature in today's meeting only allows meeting attendees to message the host and the co-host and no other meeting participants. Any questions, thoughts, and comments can be sent via Zoom chat to the meeting host or co-host. If you have a supporting resource link to share with meeting participants regarding an agenda item currently being discussed, please share that link with the meeting host or co-host to share with the meeting attendees. All materials for today's meeting are available at the OHP Bridge Advisory Committee website, which I think Katie's going to put in the chat now if she hasn't already. And lastly, we ask that all OBAC members remain on camera throughout the meeting if at all possible. We understand sometimes that just can't be done. In order to preserve bandwidth, though, we ask that non-members remain off camera unless providing public testimony. All right, so I will now turn it over to Katie to do roll call.
All right, thank you, Mike. Okay, I'm going to call your name. If you can please come off mute and say that you are here. I can't see all the people on the screen, so we'll need a verbal response. Debbie.
Here.
Thank you. Katarina.
I'm here.
Great. Mike.
I'm here.
Eduardo.
I'm here.
Great. Jonathan.
Here.
Fantastic. Mariah.
Here.
Fantastic. Angelica.
Here.
Perfect. Renisha. Renisha, are you present? Okay. Nora.
Yes, here.
Great. Okay, do we have our ODHS representative? I think that's Jillian today.
Yes, Katie, I am here. Thank you.
All right, Jillian. Thank you. And Nikki, are you here for OHA? I know there's some Zoom issues.
This is Laurel. She's having Zoom issues, but I know that she's trying to get back in. Oh, and she perhaps might even be here by phone.
Okay. Cool.
Nikki, are you able to come off mute? If not, I can step in on her behalf if anything pops up while we're waiting.
Perfect. Thank you, Laurel.
Yeah.
Okay. I will hand it back to you, Mike.
All right, thanks, Katie. So hopefully everybody can see the agenda up on the screen. I'll kind of walk through that a little bit, but as a reminder, we've opted to move the public comment portion of the meeting to the top of the agenda, which I mentioned earlier. Reason for that is to make it easier for members of the public to provide comments at a more consistent time each meeting. Previously, we had it at the end. They'd have to wait through the entire presentation. It just works out much easier for the public to have it at the beginning of the meeting. We'll do our best to ensure the public comment starts within the first 20 minutes of each meeting. With that in mind, today's meeting will include, and you can see this on the screen, a review of and hopefully a vote of the July OBAC minutes, public comments, new member introductions, which Katie is going to lead, an overview of the OBAC to help orient our new members. It also is a nice refresher for the members who've already been on for the last year or so. Katie will lead that as well. General updates about OBAC work since we last met in July. That'll be led by Katie and Tim. Then we're going to transition a little bit more into some OHP Bridge data analysis. Josie will be helping lead that. Then we'll see how it looks in terms of time, but we'll take a break at that time. We'll see if it's 10 minutes or if it's a little bit longer. We'll play it by ear. And then at 2:30, we're going to have Claire come in and she's going to give a discussion on the federal impacts of Medicaid or to Medicaid, the marketplace and rural health. And then we will end with updates on community engagement, which I think Katie is also going to lead as well. And then we'll close. All right. So having gone over the agenda, our first order of business this afternoon is to vote on the draft July OBAC meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve the draft July OBAC meeting minutes?
This is John. I'll motion to approve.
Thank you, Jonathan. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, thank you, Debbie. We have a second from Debbie. So Katie, I will turn it over to you to take a vote.
Great. Okay, I'm just going to go down through the same list I did for roll call. So please vote for or against approving the minutes. Debbie.
Yes.
Great. Katerina. Oh, sorry. I should note, if you were not here in July, we do not expect you to vote on the minutes. So actually we'll skip over our new members and we'll come back to you for introduction soon. Mike.
Yes.
Great. Let's see, Jonathan.
You know what? I motion to approve, but I just realized I missed the July meeting.
Oh, I think that's okay. Angelica. Oh, sorry, Angelica, I don't think I heard you.
Yes, sorry.
Great.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Let's see, Nora.
Yes.
Okay, and let's see. Okay, we have approved the minutes. Thank you, everyone.
Awesome. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Katie. So we'll now move to the next item on the agenda, which is the public comment. So the OHP Bridge Advisory Committee welcomes and deeply appreciates public testimony. To be respectful of everyone's time and ensure we are focused on listening, we will not respond to what you share, nor will we attempt to fix or resolve the question or concern you may bring today. We will also not interject to correct inaccurate statements or to share it as fact. We will take your comments seriously, understand it as important consideration for our work, and listen with careful attention and respect. We want to acknowledge that time held in our meetings to hear public testimony is meant to provide a voice and perspective from that individual and is not a representation of the OHP Bridge Advisory Committee, its members, or the Oregon Health Authority. Each presenter will be given up to 2 minutes to share, and in the event that does not feel like enough time, we encourage you to provide written testimony, which we will commit to reading. To help keep us on time, Katie's going to start a 2-minute timer for each commenter. We kindly ask that commenters conclude their presentation when the timer is complete. Please know that written and verbal public comments will be reviewed and discussed following each meeting by the committee chairs and staff to determine the appropriate next steps. Just a final note, if needed, you're welcome to share your video while presenting the public comment, but please keep them off for the remainder of the meeting to reduce bandwidth capability issues. So I will open it up to the public right now to see if there's any comments. So if you would like to provide comment, please let us know. And you can either put a note in the chat or you can raise your hand so that way we can ensure you have an opportunity to provide your comment. Okay, I think that was probably an awkward enough amount of silence. So I'm guessing that there's going to be no public comments today. But for the public who is attending today, I want to welcome you for attending this, and we're happy to have you here to hear kind of what's going on with our committee. All right, so we're going to do the new member introductions now, which I'm really excited about. We've got 3 good new committee members coming on board, so I'm really excited for this. So we're going to move on to the new member introductions. As you know, OHA conducted recruitment for 3 open seats over the summer and spent September reviewing the applications. The new members were selected and notified at the end of the month. I'm now going to hand it over to Katie, who's our OBAC staff lead, to walk us through the process a bit more and introduce the new members.
Thank you so much, Mike. I am also very, very excited to introduce our new members. We can go on to the next slide. I'm just going to provide a really quick overview for folks about how recruitment worked a little bit, and then we'll move on to introductions as well. So as Mike mentioned, we conducted a recruitment over the summer. We announced the launch and opening of recruitment at our July meeting, and then it ran through the end of August. We received 29 applications, and we were truly, truly thrilled with the quality of applicants that we got. We were incredibly impressed with so many, and it was a really difficult decision. We were recruiting for 3 positions, our OHP Bridge member, healthcare provider, and health equity representative seats. So once we closed recruitment, OHA staff sat down and reviewed the applications. We had several meetings to talk through everybody and create a final proposal of our top 3 candidates who we presented to leadership towards the end of September. And they did review our proposal and ended up approving those top 3 candidates. So we will be introducing them here in a second. But before we do that, I did want to flag that going forward, this cohort of folks included, everybody will be serving 2-year terms. So you might remember back when we launched the OBAC in October of 2024, we asked our members to choose between 1 and 2-year terms, and that was to ensure that we didn't have a wholesale replacement of new members every 2 to 4 years. So now that we've established that kind of staggered cadence, we've got everybody onto a 2-year term, and then our members do have the chance to renew their terms once, so they can serve a total of 4 years on the committee. And with that, we can go to the next slide. Okay, so we're going to do 2 rounds of introductions. The first will be our new members. So we've got these folks listed on the screen here. I'm going to ask our new members, if you aren't already on camera, to please come on camera and introduce yourselves using the bullets listed on the left-hand side of the screen. So start with your name and your pronouns if you're comfortable sharing, as well as your seat, which is listed in case you've forgotten, the county that you're from, your organization and role if you're comfortable sharing, and then one thing you're hoping to learn from your term with this committee. So we'll go ahead and start with Katarina.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Katarina DeMarais. She, her pronouns. I was blessed with getting the healthcare provider seat. I'm from Multnomah County. I'm currently an assistant nurse manager in Portland, which I enjoy immensely. One thing that I'm hoping to learn, how to help make healthcare more equitable.
That's great. Thank you, Katarina. Eduardo.
Thank you, Katie. Hi, everyone. My name is Eduardo Figueroa. I am with Raíces de Bienestar. We are a nonprofit in Washington County. We're a culturally specific organization and provide mental health services to the Latina community. I am in the, I lost it. Health equity seat. In my interest of joining was just a big need for an organization like us to understand this program, understand how we can better support our patients, and understand the value of OHP Bridge and how I can leverage this information to bring it back to the community and continue to serve the type of services we provide to them.
Fantastic. Thank you, Eduardo. Mariah.
Hello, my name is Mariah Hall. I'm an OHP Bridge member, and before that, I've been on regular OHP my whole entire life. I work for Crossroads Communities. It's a nonprofit where I'm a client service advocate and a certified recovery mentor. I focus on client services and resident services for Marion and Polk counties. And I'm just excited to learn everything I can about this program. I know before I had enrolled, I didn't know very much, and neither did any of my doctors or anything. So I'm just excited, and I'm excited to share my experience with all of you guys as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Mariah. And a huge welcome to all 3 of you. We're very, very excited to have you on the committee for at least the next 2 years. Okay, and we wanted to give you all a chance too to put names to faces as well. I know Zoom kind of does that for you, but just to give everyone a chance to meet the new folks and the new folks to meet the returning and continuing members. So we're going to do a slightly shorter version of introductions, and we're going to start with Mike. And if you all can use the bullet points on the right-hand side just to give a really quick hello, that would be great. So we'll start with our co-chairs and we'll start with you, Mike.
All right, thanks, Katie, and welcome all 3 of you. Happy to have you here. So I'm Mike Durbin. I use he, him, and his pronouns. I'm located in rural Douglas County, and my seat is the healthcare organization seat. Trevor, you, Nora.
Nora Leibowitz. I work for Care Oregon. Oh, she, her. I work for Care Oregon, so I'm in a healthcare organization seat. Multnomah County is where I work and live.
Amazing. Angelica, I think we're going to go to you next.
Hey everybody, my name is Angelica. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a OHP assistant and navigator, and I work at the Multnomah County area.
Amazing. Thank you, Angelica. Debbie.
Hi everyone, Debbie Cabrales. My pronouns are she, hers, ella. I am with Centro de Servicios para Campesinos. I am taking on the consumer advocacy seat, and I'm in Marion County.
Thank you, Debbie. Renisha, are you, just in case you've joined, Renisha, have you joined since we did roll? Don't think I see. Okay. Jonathan, then we'll go to you next.
Hi, John Hall, he, him. I am the one of the healthcare providers, dentist, and I am in Clackamas County.
Perfect. Thank you, Jonathan. Kelly. Oh, I know Kelly might be late as well. Let's see. Kelly, are you on the call? Okay. That is all right. Okay. Well, I'll also note, you might see that the tribal representative seat is not filled at the moment. This is not a seat that OHA, that the health policy staff recruit for. This is filled by the Oregon tribes themselves. So we had Brandon Tupper on our committee for a little bit, and then he changed roles and was not able to continue with the OBAC. And so we have made the Oregon tribes aware of this, and we've shared all of the information that's needed for them to recruit. But they have a lot of requests for representation on various committees, so they fill it as they are able to do so. So we'll keep you all posted on that as well. I am also realizing we didn't include our 2 non-voting seats. So I'm wondering, Jillian, are you able to come off mute and say hello really quickly and just give a really quick overview of your role?
Absolutely. Hello, my name's Jillian Johnson. She, her, hers are my pronouns. I am a Deputy Director for the Oregon Eligibility Partnership within the Oregon Department of Human Services. We are the entity that is responsible for the system and the people who determine the financial eligibility for Medicaid, food, childcare, and cash benefits. Happy to be here with you all.
Amazing. Thank you, Jillian. And Nikki, I believe we've unmuted you now. So if you're...
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. My name is Nikki Olson. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Deputy Director at the Health Policy and Analytics Division within OHA. Been a part of the launch of OHP Bridge, creation and launch with folks that are staffing here today. So grateful for you all and happy to be here.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Nikki. And I think I saw Kelly join. Kelly, are you able to give a really quick introduction, just using the 4 bullet points on the right-hand side of the screen, not to throw you into hot water the moment you arrive?
Okay. Okay. My name's Kelly. My preferred pronouns are she, her. And seat means like what I'm doing on
what seat you are on the committee.
I think it's community member, or is that what it's called? Okay. And I live in Washington County.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Okay. Well, I think that's our round of introductions. Again, welcome to our new members, and welcome back to our returning members. We're excited to have you all here. I think it's back to you, Mike.
Thank you very much. And I'm glad everybody had a chance to kind of get at least a little bit of background. And again, I want to welcome Katerina, Eduardo, and Mariah. This is going to be a great committee moving forward, just like it has been. So we're actually moving right along in terms of time, just as an FYI for the group. But up next, we have an OBAC overview. So we're gonna have Katie kind of walk through the committee kind of at a high level. This is to do some level setting for new members and also as a refresher for current members to make sure we all have a foundational understanding and affirm some of the essential functions of this group. As a quick reminder, we're only going to be taking questions from OBAC members during any kind of presentations, including this one. For OBAC members, please remember to use the raise hand function so that we can see when you have a question, and Katie or I will acknowledge that and have you come off mute. Over to you, Katie.
Thank you so much, Mike. So as Mike said, the goal of this is just to provide a little bit of background and level setting for everybody here. Our new members did receive some onboarding materials that dived quite a bit deeper than this. So this will just be a quick 4-slide overview, but we did want to provide it, especially now that we're at the 1-year mark. So we can go on to the next slide. Okay, so the OHP Bridge Advisory itself, also called the OBAC, did launch back in October of 2024. So just a moment of excitement for the fact that we've officially hit 1 year of this committee being in action, and it's been quite fun and a big learning experience as well. So we're excited to have you all along for this ride. It was the purpose and goal of this committee was to provide a space for our community partners, providers, and members to have a space to provide input on how the program is run and operated and what it looks like. So it provides recommendations on OHP Bridge to our leadership and trustees to help guide our trust fund management, which is how the financial component of OHP Bridge, especially OHP Bridge Basic Health Program, as well as guide things like member outreach and communications. It helps create a space for us to provide reporting back on things like federal negotiations, as well as considerations for potential revisions to the BRG or OHP Bridge benefit. We do want to highlight here, and we'll dive more into this in a moment, but the OBAC is not a decision-making body. So we just provide recommendations, and it does include 11 voting members when we're at full capacity, as well as 2 non-voting members. So we have met all of the voting members so far that we have. And then our non-voting members are those 2 leadership folks, Jillian and Nikki. A huge thank you again for attending. And they are here to help provide just the perspective of the 2 agencies, as well as some expert background and input and feedback as we need it. So we can go on to the next slide. Okay, so as we mentioned, this is a recommendation-based committee. We provide recommendations to OHA and ODHS leadership, as well as our OHP Bridge Trust Fund trustees. So again, those are the folks that manage the trust fund that provides payments out for OHP Bridge. Ultimately, at the end of the day, our executive agency leadership and those trustees that I just mentioned make the final decisions about how changes will be made to OHP Bridge design and operations and spending. That being said, anytime we provide a recommendation, it will be considered very heavily in those final decisions. We also want to note that this committee was not statutorily required. That means it wasn't, the agency was not required by law to create it. It was something that we developed because we feel it's very important to create a space for input and feedback and thoughts and discussion with our partners and community that are impacted by this program, whether they're delivering it or receiving benefits through it. It also means that we've been building it from the ground up. So as we did that, we've really leaned heavily on infrastructure and precedent set by the Medicaid Advisory Committee, the Health Insurance Marketplace Advisory Committee, and the Oregon Health Policy Board. So if you've been involved in any of those committees or have attended meetings, it might feel a little bit similar to how this one is run. We did start with the infrastructure that they created, and then we've built and adapted since then to the needs of this specific group. Lastly, we wanted to flag that in addition to not being decision-making as a committee, we also wanted to really make sure that we're clear about scope. So this committee deals specifically with OHP Bridge and things that are related to that benefit package, which means we do not provide recommendations on things like marketplace affordability, traditional OHP, or sort of the broader CCO system, ecosystem. So obviously there will be things within all 3 of those that might overlap slightly with OHP Bridge, and therefore we might bring them into the discussion. But ultimately, the focus of this committee is OHP Bridge, its member services, and the benefit package itself. So just want to make sure we're keeping that scope in mind as we dive into more detailed and nuanced topics. We can go on to the next slide. So with all of that background in mind, we also wanted to provide a quick overview of kind of the member expectations and responsibilities. So our members are expected to participate in all meetings. So that being said, we recognize life happens and sometimes you're not able to make it. And so we do add the caveat that we expect members to attend 75% of meetings. So we meet quarterly as a committee, so that would mean 3 out of 4 meetings in a year. If a member is not able to do that, we'll reach out and see if we can find a way to work with your specific needs. It doesn't mean an automatic removal from the committee, but it does mean a more in-depth conversation about what support you might need to attend more consistently. In addition, members are expected to review the provided materials, and this is just so that folks can attend ready to dive deeper into the topics that are presented, ask questions, and take part in the conversation. We're really, really excited about the different viewpoints and backgrounds that people bring on this committee, and so we want to make sure that you're prepared to take part and provide the insights that you have. Similarly, that means engaging in policy level discussions about healthcare in Oregon. That is what we do at this committee. So just making sure that you're ready to take part in that. Additionally, while we recognize that we have 2 OHP Bridge or community member seats, we also want to remember that regardless of what specialty you're coming in with or what seat you fill, it's very critical that we keep the voices and perspectives of our OHP Bridge members at the center, and that they're elevated and really prioritized. These are the folks that are most directly impacted by this program, and we want to make sure that we're considering their needs and their voices very highly. Lastly, this is just a reminder I like to give on an annual basis now, is we have, as I mentioned, a lot of people coming from a lot of different backgrounds and perspectives and experiences. And that includes both different levels of experience interacting on state and government committees, as well as different levels of experience interacting and talking about things like policy. So to our members who might have a bit more experience in this area, we ask that you remember and keep that in mind, that people might be coming in with a different level of experience than you, and that all of those viewpoints and thoughts are important, and we want to make sure that everyone feels comfortable taking part and voicing their thoughts and feedback. So just keeping in mind that we want to stay respectful and constructive in our conversation so that everybody feels they can take part. Okay, I think I have just one more slide. Okay, based on that last thing here, and I promise this is the last time I'm going to announce this, but we are officially on our quarterly cadence, which means we are now meeting January, April, July, and October of every year. Our meetings will run from 1 to 4 p.m. I do know we don't always hit that 4 p.m. Cutoff. Sometimes we end a little bit earlier. And so I want to acknowledge that and also flag that we are asking people to still hold that full time, because there may very well be meetings where we really need that full time. So we're asking people to keep the full 3 hours on their calendar. We will be holding all of our meetings virtually over Zoom. All of the 2026 meetings should be on the OBAC website, which is listed here. And in addition to that, just a quick reminder that all of our meetings are public, they are recorded, and they are posted to the public website that's listed on the screen. Lastly, we're just adding one final reminder that members do need to attend at least those 3 meetings a year in order to maintain status as an OBAC member. Okay, I think that's it. Does anybody have any questions about that level set or thoughts, things they want to add? Yes, Mike.
So I'll put my hand up so I can lead by example. So 2 things. So going back to the point about notification, if you're going to miss a meeting, if you know you're not going to make it, just if you have the opportunity, send a quick message to Katie and me and Nora so we have some advance notice. That way we're not asking questions, wondering where you are. If it's, life happens, we understand that. Just let us know. It just makes it so much easier. We've had to reach out to individuals in the past and we didn't know where they were, why they couldn't make it. And what's concerning for us, not because they missed a meeting, we were just concerned about them. So it does help us a lot. The other thing I'll add to related to this slide is we have quarterly meetings, but there could be a scenario where maybe we do request an ad hoc meeting, depending on what's happening out in the world. So just have that in mind. We would give more than a month, more than enough advance notice. We would see if that would actually work for everybody. But just be aware that even though we're quarterly, if something is really important, really pressing, that could be something that comes up.
Both really great reminders. Thank you so much, Mike. I also want to know if you are attending the meeting for the first time and you have curiosity about more in-depth details on the committee and how it works. Our materials for past meetings are also all listed on this OBAC website, and that includes our October, November, December meetings, which really dived into the committee itself and its background, as well as the background on OHP Bridge. So that's a great resource if you're wanting to learn more. Any other questions or thoughts? Okay, I think we can turn it back over to you, Mike.
All right. Thanks, Katie. I appreciate the overview. So, but hold tight. We're going to be coming back to you very, very quickly. So next up, we're going to have Katie, who's going to be joined by Tim Sweeney, who is the Senior Policy Analyst for OHP Bridge, to provide some general updates on what's been going on in the month since we last met in July. So Katie and Tim, take it away.
Thanks. And I think I only have one slide here, and then you get to hear somebody else talk. So we can go to the next slide. And this section is just, it's something that we do every meeting. It's just a chance for us to provide some smaller, more general updates that don't fit into a larger section. So for our new members, that's something you'll get to see going forward. So one of our smaller announcements is that we have some new OHP Bridge rules that are in progress. These are a pretty minor change to these rules. I should also note that they are currently live and active through our temporary rule process. They'll be going permanent in about 6 months. But in the meantime, we are going through the community engagement and input portion of the rulemaking process. So this is a fairly minor revision. It's just to ensure that the rules align the annual income limits for this program with federal regulations. We've talked about this a little bit more over previous meetings, I believe in May and July. So again, those materials are there if you want to review that. But it is currently will be coming open for public comment on these rules if you are curious about them in November. And we'll be chatting through this a little bit more in our community engagement update section as well. But just wanted to flag that these are out here and being worked on. And we'll dive in a little bit more in depth here in a little bit. I think I'm handing it over to Tim for the rest of the updates.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tim Sweeney in the Office of Health Policy, and have been the policy lead for our development of this program. First off, and we've got just a couple additional updates, but first off, I did want to at least acknowledge, this has certainly been in the news, that there's going to be CCO coverage changes in 2026 in Lane County. Pacific Source, Lane County, decided not to renew their contract with the state for 2026 for either Medicaid, OHP Bridge, or Healthier Oregon. And what that means is that about 2,500 OHP Bridge members currently, or as of like a couple weeks ago, enrolled in Pacific Source in Lane County will have to transition to another CCO. I think where this is relevant, why we wanted to bring this forward, especially to y'all, is just the reminder that unlike in Medicaid and Healthier Oregon, federal rules require that we enroll basic health program members, so thus OHP Bridge members, in a standard plan. What is the standard plan is the federal term. We use CCOs here to deliver the standard plan, but the federal rules around basic health programs envision and require that they are delivered through a managed care entity, either a Medicaid plan like we do or a commercial plan like some other states do. But members have to be enrolled in these plans. So that transition planning for all of this is underway at OHA. It's certainly, I think, fair to say that like throughout that work, there's consideration to the uniqueness of OHP Bridge. And that federal requirement that folks be in CCOs. Obviously, OHP Bridge is a relatively small portion of the overall population of members who are in Pacific Source, Lane County. 2,500 OHP Bridge members, it's something like 90,000 total. But we wanted to flag this so at least y'all know that in that planning work, the OHP Bridge impact and population is certainly part of it. It's not getting forgotten. And then broadly, I think to just remind and commit that OHA is committed to ensuring a member-focused transition process that minimizes disruption to care to the greatest extent possible. Obviously, hopefully the goal is that it fully eliminates disruption to care. We don't have in this meeting a plan to sort of like get into the details of this. Certainly, if there are questions or concerns that folks have in thinking about this, we can take them and bring them back to the teams that are working on that transition and get responses back to the committee as appropriate based on sort of like where all that work is and what is still in negotiation and what is decided. And certainly we'll, I think, offer another update at our next meeting in January, what is actually happening and might be able to provide a little bit more detail as to how that transition plays out and what exactly it looks like. Okay, on to the next slide. More fun stuff. We're going to talk a little bit about a brief federal update, but as part of that, a brief sort of like federal and financial update, but as part of that, wanted to offer this reminder of the basic health program federal funding structure, how we get paid for OHP Bridge. And there are several factors that determine the amount of money the state gets to operate this program. The amount of money is based on enrollment, and for each individual on the program, there's a calculation that determines the amount that we get based on what they would have received in federal tax credits had they been enrolled in a marketplace plan. And there's a bunch of sort of different adjustment factors as part of the BHP formula that are used to sort of land on that estimate of what would have been available to those individuals in terms of premium tax credits. One of the big calculations is based on what premiums will be for 2026, what the actual filed premiums are from all the plans, as well. That's used to sort of calculate the base sort of premium tax credit amount. And then there's some other factors that adjust based on, for instance, Oregon having a reinsurance program that affects the premium rates of the plans in the marketplace. We are still awaiting the 2026 federal funding methodology. We have learned from CMS that it's likely to come out by the end of October, which is a little bit later than normal. I think, at least in part due to the federal shutdown. But we can still at least say a little bit about what we expect from a financial standpoint for the next year. So on the next slide. So thinking about what all this means for 2026, one of the central issues in the shutdown that has gotten a lot of coverage has been looming expiration of some enhanced marketplace tax credits that have been in place for a few years and are set to expire at the end of 2025. These enhanced tax credits bolster federal funding for basic health programs like OHP Bridge. And so thus the expiration of these tax credits at the end of 2025 would reduce federal payments to Oregon on a per member basis. Our current analysis suggests that this expiration reduces federal BHP funding coming to Oregon by about 15% or so. And that's, again, comparing what 2026 would be if these enhanced tax credits remained in place versus what we think 2026 funding would be without them. That said, like I said, the federal payment methodology is not yet released. Some of those factors that I was alluding to could be a little bit different than in 2025, and that could sort of mess with that amount on the margins. It could be a little bit more than 15%, maybe a little bit less. But one thing to note is one of the bigger adjustment factors. It's about almost a 19% bump that sort of compensate states for not having a process called silver loading, which is too complicated for us to get into today. That adjustment will apply to Oregon's funding in 2026. It is also part of Oregon's funding in 2025, but for a minute there was some uncertainty as whether that would continue. So that the continuation of that adjustment helps solidify our projected federal revenue. All of that said, we do believe that program costs in 2026 are still projected to be, or are projected to be less than in 2025. And that is broadly due to lower program spending in 2024 than was predicted. I think it's fair to say when this program launched in 2024, there was a lot of uncertainty as to the needs of members and to the costs at an individual level or an aggregate level that we would see. And so I think there was erring on overestimating the potential costs for members and not wanting to not give plans enough money to provide services. And so we've seen that costs have come in a little bit lower than expected, and thus capitation rates projected costs for 2026 are projected to be lower than in 2025. And next slide, we can talk about a little bit what that means, which is broadly to say that despite the federal funding loss, if the enhanced tax credits do go away, per member federal revenue is still expected to exceed per member costs in 2026. Basically, we still expect the program to be able to fully operate within the federal revenue we get in 2026, which was, broadly speaking, the goal from the outset. Again, just to remind on a couple caveats, the full methodology is not yet released, and so that will affect program revenue, at least on the margins. And then per member revenue, as well as costs, but especially revenue, is heavily dependent on member age and income. Costs are not dependent on income, but the amount that we get paid from the federal government is. So variations in what 2026 enrollment looks like could also lead to revised projections or a revised reality of sort of program costs versus program revenue. Any questions? I know that was sort of a lot of somewhat vagueness in terms of cost and revenue projections, and we don't have sort of like a simple bottom line that we can give, but we did want to at least pass along that pending the final release of the methodology, our projected costs are at least lower than projected revenue. Okay. Oh, I see a hand. Nora.
Just wanting to make sure I'm tracking. When you say program costs are projected to be less than 2025, is that primarily the CCO capitation?
It is, I would say it is primarily the capitation costs, just because the program costs are primarily capitation costs. There are some services delivered on a fee-for-service basis, but they're a relatively small portion of overall program costs. So yes, the change in cost is driven largely by changes in the capitation rates.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm having a hard time finding my hand to raise.
No problem. Go for it.
Is the bridge population expected to rise, the number of bridge people that could qualify for bridge with the shorter, is it every 6 months that people have to reapply for OHP now?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I don't want to get ahead of the sort of federal section that we have, but I think the easy answer to your question is in the future, once that happens, once redeterminations are happening in Medicaid more often, I think it is fair that we would expect more people to move to OHP Bridge compared to the current world where redeterminations are happening every 2 years or some cases. So I do think it's too early for us to be able to say like how that affects numbers is what sort of increase in underlying population we'd expect or how many more members we'd expect to move every month or every year or whatnot, because also it could increase the number of people moving from Bridge back to Medicaid if their income changes while they're on Bridge. So I think that there's moving pieces there, but I think broadly speaking, the role of OHP Bridge in sort of keeping people on their current CCO when their income costs them Medicaid eligibility by a little bit could become more notable after those eligibility changes are implemented.
Thanks.
Great questions, Nora and Jonathan. Does anybody have any other comments or questions for Tim?
Great. Well, thanks for having me. And if especially after Claire's presentation on the federal changes, if there's sort of more follow-up connected to Bridge specifically, I'll still be here and we can happily answer more questions on that.
All right, thank you, Tim. And also Katie, she did do a slide, so thank her as well. All right, so we're now going to transition over to hear from Josie, who is a senior research analyst for our coverage team. You may remember Josie presenting before on population demographic data, so we're excited to have her here again. Today, we're going to hear some updates on questions that we've had and Josie's findings on that data. Again, if members have questions, please use the raise hand function so we can see you. Welcome, Josie.
Thank you. Hello, nice to be back. I think what I'm going to present, actually, the last question leads nicely into it. So if we can go to the next slide. So I'm going to present today on what I've termed enrollment patterns, which can mean a whole bunch of things, but I've listed kind of two guiding questions for the various analyses that we're going to look at over the next slides. The first question being, how much movement in and out of the program is there, and how long are people enrolled in OHP Bridge? So while we don't know what's going to happen in the future, for the last question, we can look at what has been happening so far. And the second question is, how much overlap is there between OHP Bridge and Medicaid? How often are people going to or coming from Medicaid? And how often do people have family members enrolled in Medicaid? So there's a lot of these questions are very broad. There's a lot of different ways to look at this. And we are this is doing our first pass at it. It leaves a lot of open questions for future investigation, but this is kind of get us grounded, given that we now have data for a year of this program and just understanding what's going on with members in OHP Bridge. So the next slide. So before I dive into the actual data, just have some methodological notes. The first three bullets are similar to or the same as what were presented in last quarter's OBAC presentation. When we refer to OHP Bridge, that does include both basic health program and basic Medicaid members. When we refer to OHP Medicaid, that includes Medicaid and CHIP members, except those who are eligible only for the Medicare Savings Program. Sometimes these folks are referred to as partial dual eligible members. It does not include Healthier Oregon program. And then when we refer to the Medicaid ACA expansion eligibility group, that means members who are age 19 to 64, who have a household income up to 138% of the federal poverty level, and who are not eligible for other eligibility groups. We often refer to this group because when talking about OHP Bridge, because it's the most similar group in OHP Medicaid to Bridge. And we, especially when looking at enrollment patterns, we would expect that people would be moving between this ACA expansion eligibility group and Bridge. And then a couple of things specific to this analysis to keep in mind. This is the first year of the Bridge program, and there are some anomalies due to that, one of which was in July 2024, there was the automatic transfer of members from the temporary Medicaid expansion into OHP Bridge. That's just a one-time occurrence. It won't be happening in the future. So some of the data reflects this, and the patterns that we see may not reflect what we will see in the future. We'll need to evaluate whether what we're seeing in the following slides holds once we get more data. And then just noting that there are retroactive eligibility changes and data updates that can occur. We don't think this is going to change any of the large patterns or trends that we're showing, but the data, if we were to come back and pull it at a later date, may change slightly, so it should be considered preliminary. Next slide. Okay, so getting into the first look at the actual data, we're starting here looking at what I've termed leavers, joiners, and stayers. So each bar represents OHP Bridge enrollment for the month, and then it's split out by joiners and leavers. A joiner is someone who is newly enrolled in OHP Bridge for the month. A stayer is someone who was enrolled in the previous month and has remained enrolled in the month of interest. And then also this greenish kind of hashed bar at the top is showing leavers, who are people that were enrolled in the previous month and have disenrolled or left OHP Bridge in the current month. So when you want to look at how did total enrollment change, that's for any month equal to the sum of joiners and stayers. And then enrollment increases month over month if the number of joiners outweighs the number of leavers. So you can see here, starting at July 2024, everyone was a joiner. The program was new. Then we get into more regular pattern. Enrollment steadily increased through the end of 2024, through December 2024. And then it started to flatten out and decrease in a couple of months. And then again, just by the end, May, June 2025, it's increasing slightly, but at a slower scale than we saw in the earlier months in 2024. So next slide. So just some highlights or takeaways from the previous chart. On average, excluding that first month where everyone was a joiner, but from August 2024 to June 2025, on average, 10% of members in each month were joiners and 90% were stayers, and 6% were leavers. We'll have to wait and see once we get additional months beyond this first year, whether those percentages hold, but this gives us kind of a baseline to think about how enrollment is changing in the program. As I mentioned, enrollment grew in almost all months except 2 months where it declined, March and April of 2025, when there was a spike in leavers that outweighed the number of joiners. And the leaving percent was higher than average in these early months of 2025, January, March, and April. There's a lot of reasons why in any given month, leavers might be, the leaving percent might be higher than average, or there might be more leavers than joiners, just a lot of reasons why members might be leaving or joining the program. But specifically in this case, there are a couple of factors that definitely played a role. One of which is during the first quarter of every year, there are income recalculations that occur. The federal poverty level guidelines that are used for eligibility get updated and eligibility is rerun. So if someone has reported an income that was close to the threshold for Medicaid, once the federal poverty level gets updated, their income may now be below that threshold and they may move to Medicaid. So that's something that happens every year. So we should expect to see that even in future years. And then something specific to this first year, the continuous eligibility period for temporary Medicaid expansion members, many of those continuous eligibility periods ended early in 2025 for these members, and they had to undergo a redetermination. And so through that process, some of them either disenrolled or moved on to Medicaid. So that's another reason why we saw this increase in leavers in those months. Next slide. Okay, so the next thing that we're looking at is how many people that are OHP Bridge members were previously enrolled in Medicaid. And so when we say previously enrolled in Medicaid, in this case, we're restricting it to the year prior to joining OHP Bridge. You obviously could go back farther, but just to kind of restrict the analysis, we're saying what percent of OHP Bridge members were an OHP Medicaid member within 12 months of joining OHP Bridge. And we look at this in two different ways. The first way is the entire 12 months of the analysis, so July 2024 to June 2025. And when we do that, we see that 70% of OHP Bridge members had come from Medicaid within 12 months of when they joined OHP Bridge. But because we know that July 2024 was kind of an outlier, we also look at just the August 2024 to June 2025 timeframe. And in that case, we see the results look quite different, and it's split half and half. So only half of the OHP Bridge members had come from Medicaid. The other half had come from elsewhere. We don't currently have information on where they came from. That could be marketplace, it could be employer-sponsored coverage, or it could be that they were previously uninsured. Next slide. So then this is diving into, for those who did transition from Medicaid to OHP Bridge, did they have a gap between their Medicaid and Bridge coverage? And if they did have a gap, how long was that gap? So once again, we're looking at this in two different ways, including and excluding the July 2024 joiner cohort. When we look at with July included, we see that a large majority, or 80% of folks who came from Medicaid came directly from Medicaid because they were part of this automatic rollover from the temporary Medicaid expansion into Bridge. When we remove July 2024, we see probably more close to what we expect to see long-term, where it's just over half, or 53%, transitioned from Medicaid to Bridge with no gap. And then the other 47% transitioned with some gap that could range from 1 to 11 months. Something to note, and that we still need to further investigate, is what's going on in these gaps of coverage. So I think the initial instinct is that there should never be a gap because we don't want people to have a gap in coverage. And I think that is probably true when we're talking about very small gaps. For example, 1 to 2 month gap, a person probably didn't have other coverage during that time and was probably, therefore just completely uncovered or uninsured. When we start talking about a longer time horizon, something like 9 to 11 months or even longer than that, it's possible that someone, for example, was on a marketplace plan or did have other coverage during that time. So it becomes a little fuzzier when we talk about having a gap between Medicaid and Bridge. They could have had something else, some other type of coverage in between the two. Next slide, please. Okay, so this slide and the next one repeat what we've just done for the overall population and splits it out by age to see if there's any variation on where people are coming from by age. So, and I should note that we For this look at the data, we are just including August 2024 to June 2025. So we're excluding the July outlier cohort. So when we look by age group, we see that the age 19 to 34-year-old group is the most likely to have had Medicaid within a year of joining OHP Bridge. 54% of them did come from Medicaid. That goes down to 46% when looking at the age 55 to 64-year-old group. This aligns with what we saw when we looked at demographics of both Medicaid members in the ACA expansion eligibility group and compared that to adult or age 19 to 64 marketplace enrollees. We saw that marketplace enrollees were much more likely to be older in, for example, the 55 to 64-year-old group. So we would therefore expect that fewer of them would be likely, fewer age 55 to 64-year-old bridge members would be likely to have come from Medicaid because they're more likely to have come from somewhere else, like the marketplace. And conversely, the younger OHP bridge members are more likely to have come from Medicaid because, as we previously saw, the Medicaid population is younger versus marketplace. So the one final thing I'll note on that is the trends, the demographic trends that we saw in last quarter's presentation were there was a much bigger difference than what we're seeing on this chart. So there's only an 8 percentage point difference between the age 19 to 34 and 55 to 64-year-old group. The difference between the marketplace and Medicaid demographics was much bigger than this, but the trend is at least in the direction that we would expect. Next slide. So this again is repeating the previous analysis, but then splitting it out by age, looking at for OHP Bridge members who did come from Medicaid, what was the gap between Medicaid and Bridge? And we do see a little bit more difference by age than we did on the previous chart. So in this case, looking at ages 19 through 44, so the two leftmost bars, we see that about half transitioned with no gap from Medicaid, and the other half had some gap of varying length. The no gap percentage goes all the way up to 64% when we look at the age 55 to 64-year-old group. So this is definitely, we don't know the reasons behind this, and it's definitely something that is worth looking more closely at. I will say one hypothesis is the fact that as in general, on average, obviously not across the board, but as people get older, they overall have more health concerns, use healthcare more, and therefore may be more motivated to ensure that they have no coverage gap. This is something that we see in other contexts, just in terms of like administrative burden. People who use care more are more likely to persist through administrative burden, and that may be reflected in what we're seeing in the differences by age. Next slide. Okay. And then this is another way. There's a lot of different ways to look at where people are going and coming from, but this is another way to look at how many people have come from Medicaid. So in this case, we're picking a fixed reference month, which in June 2024, and saying for each bridge enrollment month, what percentage of OHP bridge members were also Medicaid members in June 2024. So we start out in July 2024 at 100%, or it's nearly 100%. And then it steadily decreases until we kind of reach a plateau around the April 2025 timeframe, where we're now less than half of the OHP bridge members were previous Medicaid members back in June 2024. So we'll have to see if this plateaus permanently at this rate, or if this, if it fluctuates in future months. But this is just another way of looking at the data on how the population has changed in terms of the first year of the program. So, yeah. Next slide. Okay, so then the next thing we're looking at is enrollment duration. So how long within, and obviously because the analysis is restricted only to 1 year, people could for sure be enrolled longer than 1 year, but we're looking at within the 1 year, how long were people enrolled. And once again, we're picking a reference month, in this case, the last month of the analysis period, June 2025, because then we have all 12 months to look at, and saying, for those members who are OHP Bridge or were enrolled in OHP Bridge in June 2025, how long were they enrolled in the 12 months of the analysis? 100% of them were enrolled for at least 1 month because they were enrolled in June, and then it steadily decreases. So 94% were enrolled for at least 2 months. You go skip to 6 months, about 2/3 were enrolled for at least 6 months. And then it goes all the way down to 31% were enrolled for at least 12 months. So in other words, they were enrolled from the start of the program all the way through June 2025. So that was only 31%. Definitely, this is something that we would expect to change in future years of the program, because we wouldn't have this ramp up time where everyone is kind of new. Next slide. So in terms of duration, on average, members were enrolled between 6 and 7 or 6.8 months during the 12 months that we looked at. They also averaged between 1 and 2 or 1.7 months of Medicaid coverage during the same time frame. So they had on average, a total of 8.5 months enrolled in either Medicaid or OHP Bridge. It's important to note that the reason why someone isn't enrolled for a full 12 months could be either because they joined the program after the start of the analysis period, and or they left the program before the end of the analysis period. So it can happen on either end as to why someone doesn't have enrollment in all months. And then briefly looking at where do people go when they're disenrolled from OHP Bridge. This is definitely something where we need more months of data, because taking June 2025, for example, if someone's disenrolled in June 2025, we just don't we don't even have 12 months of data to look out yet. So I'm just briefly looking at what we do have. We see that 45% or just under half of the OHP Bridge leavers transitioned directly to Medicaid the following month. And of those who transitioned to Medicaid, unsurprisingly, the large majority moved to the ACA expansion eligibility group, and then smaller percents moved to the parent caretaker group and pregnancy group. There's also even smaller percents that aren't on this slide that move to various other Medicaid eligibility groups. Next slide. Okay, so then this kind of the last portion of the analysis looks at what I've termed family enrollment patterns. A family can obviously mean many things. The technical definition that we're using for this analysis, we're referring to a family as members who are on an eligibility case or an eligibility application together, because that's the data that we have. An eligibility case includes generally members who are part of a tax household together or they live together. And then members within a case are grouped into households for using fairly complex state and federal rules to determine eligibility for various programs such as Bridge, Medicaid, and SNAP. So a case can have multiple households, and why a household is relevant. Generally, eligibility for programs is determined based on household income. So income from members of a household will be aggregated and then compared to the various income thresholds based on the household size and the federal poverty level guidelines. So that's just kind of why it's relevant to mention a household. So looking at the actual data, we see that 26% of OHP Bridge members had another family member also enrolled in OHP Bridge at the same time. Conversely, a little less than 3/4 of OHP Bridge members were the only OHP Bridge member in their family. When we look at Medicaid, 44% of OHP Bridge members had a family member simultaneously enrolled in Medicaid or CHIP. And then among these 44%, the overwhelming majority, or 91%, had a child, someone under the age of 19, enrolled in Medicaid or CHIP simultaneously, and then a quarter had a family member, an adult family member age 19 or older, enrolled in Medicaid. This is what we would expect just due to how the eligibility rules work. The income thresholds for child Medicaid and CHIP are higher than those for generally than those for adults. So if everyone, just for simplicity, on a case or a family is part of the same eligibility household, they would all have the same income, but a child may be determined eligible for Medicaid or CHIP, and the adult may be determined eligible for bridge. So as an example, if the household had an income 175% of the federal poverty level, that would be a case where the child would be Medicaid eligible and the adult would be bridge eligible. It's a little bit more complicated than that, since bridge uses annual income and Medicaid uses monthly income, but that's the idea of why we're seeing so many children in Medicaid and adults in bridge. Next slide. So this is the final data slide, and it's kind of the reverse look at family enrollment, and it's looking at Medicaid members who have a family member simultaneously enrolled in OHP Bridge and saying, you know, who are the Medicaid members? And you can see that the majority are in the ACA expansion eligibility group, and the majority are in the age 19 to 34 age group. Not explicitly shown in the tables, but when you kind of cross the two, it's just under half are both age 19 to 64 and in the ACA expansion eligibility group. This also probably makes sense because of how the household composition rules work. It's more likely in a lot of cases for a young adult to be on an eligibility application with other family members, but be part of a separate household just due to, you know, tax filing status and things like that. So this would make sense why they might have a different eligibility determination than other adults in their family. Okay, so next slide. So this is just a wrap up of summary of what I presented. I think the main thing is this provides a baseline, a reference point, and presents a lot of additional questions that are worthy of investigation. But there aren't necessarily a lot of firm conclusions to draw. We don't know the reasons behind the trends we're seeing. We're not entirely sure if those trends will continue. As I've mentioned multiple times, the transition, the automatic transition from the temporary Medicaid expansion members that occurred really skewed the results in a lot of cases. And in a similar vein, for members who were not part of the temporary Medicaid expansion, they would not have undergone an annual eligibility redetermination for bridge during the analysis timeframe. So we don't have a good look at what's going to happen once those redeterminations occur. I think the biggest takeaway that's probably fair to and to conclude even with only this initial data is that most members do have a connection to Medicaid. More than half of Bridge members were enrolled in Medicaid sometime in the year before they were enrolled in Bridge. More than 40% when they disenroll from Bridge are transitioning directly to Medicaid, and more than 40% of members had a family member simultaneously enrolled in Medicaid in any given month. So when you combine all these three bullets, most OHP Bridge members have some connection to Medicaid. So again, not surprising, but this just shows what we know from the data. So that concludes the presentation, and I'll pause to see if there's any questions.
So Josie, I'll pop a question in. Just I'm kind of curious, was there anything else that you found while data mining that's not presented here that you thought was curious or interesting?
Uh, mm, I not really. Tried to put most of the interesting findings in the presentation, so nothing's immediately coming to mind. I think there's a couple things where we don't have answers where I would want to look further, but I haven't, we don't actually have not actually looked at the data yet, like things around gaps in coverage and what's actually like why those gaps are occurring. But I haven't looked at that data yet.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Josie. Eduardo.
Thank you. Hi, Josie. A quick question regarding, I'm interested in the data of the 6% of individuals that disenroll. You were sharing that 45% re-enroll in full Medicaid. Do we have data? What happened with the other percentage of individuals, meaning they weren't commercial or they were attached to another family member's plan? I think that's also relevant to understand the current context and
Yeah, definitely agree that we unfortunately right now don't have more information, but I would say that this is high on the list to understand. And hopefully in the future can get more data to figure out what's happening with these members, especially once we, for folks that are aware, once Oregon becomes a state-based marketplace, which is planned for the 2027 coverage year, we definitely will have more ability to track people to the marketplace. But yeah, we definitely want to see what's going on with the other 55%. I will also say that we might be able to answer a little bit more of that just with Medicaid data once we have a few additional months of data. Since I was only looking at who transitioned directly to Medicaid, and if we add in like who transitioned after a month or two of gap, that might fill in some of the percent, but there's definitely other populations that we want to understand more.
can I have a quick follow-up? So it
Sure.
seems like 3%, we don't know if they went commercial or just went uninsured. What will be the number of members that 3% represent? Just a ballpark number,
Sorry, what's the 3%?
because 6% lost coverage, pretty much like left bridge, and you're saying
Oh,
45% went Medicaid. So
oh,
I'm
okay.
just roughly calculating 3%.
Okay, got it. To be honest with you, I don't think we know, just because we don't have the data to track where people are going, if it's commercial, marketplace or uninsured. If I had to guess, I mean, I would probably say a substantial portion going to marketplace, but we really just don't have the data to back up my gut assumption. So
Sure.
yeah.
No, I was just trying to calculate a number. No, exactly.
Oh, yeah. Would have to get back to you on that, which I probably can. You're just looking for like a raw number of the
Yeah, raw number. I
people.
mean, if there are,
Got it.
100,000
Yeah.
individuals.
Yeah, I can probably get back to you within this meeting, just during the break. I can take a look at the numbers then. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great question, Roberto. Nora, I saw you had your hand up and put it down. I don't know if you want the opportunity to ask a question or comment.
It was really just like I can do some general like about statewide patterns of utilization based on the relative amount of money that like the relative capitation rates for this group and Medicaid, but just I think putting my hand out there that I'm continue to be interested in what these folks look like from a utilization perspective. You know, statewide, we all have expectations about what their use is relative to Medicaid members, but just interested in that as well.
Noted, and thank you for the interest. That is something that's also definitely high on our list to tackle next. So hopefully we will be able to provide some insight on the utilization front in the near future.
And I mean, I know that we have enough data to set the 2026 rates, so you know, even if it's
All right, thank you, Nora. Any other comments or questions for Josie?
Hi, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Okay. So can bridge members, do they have the option to be on either open card or a CCO, or is that not allowed?
Tim, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I can take that. That is not allowed. They don't have the same open card option as in Medicaid, and that is really due to the federal requirements for how states are supposed to operate a basic health program. It is required that states deliver it through a managed care entity.
So just so I understand, so if somebody has Medicaid, they can choose to be in a CCO or open card, but not with bridge.
So I would like I should back up and not give too much on the Medicaid piece, because it's more complicated than just everybody has the option to be on open card. There's certain scenarios in which somebody is able to opt out of CCO coverage. It is even in the Medicaid space, it's a significant majority CCO coverage, and I would need to we could take back the question and get somebody from Medicaid to sort of provide some more information on what those exceptions are in the Medicaid space.
All right, great questions, Kelly. Thank you, Tim. Any other comments or questions for Josie? All right, hearing none, Josie, thank you very much for your presentation. Always a pleasure. Love learning more about the data. I mean, we want to have data-informed decisions here to the extent we can, so that's phenomenal. So I do have a little bit of a change related to the agenda. So because Claire can only be here for her part of the presentation from 2:30 to 3, we're going to take a quick 5-minute break instead of 10. Hope it's enough time for everybody to use facilities, stretch out your legs, take a little bit of a break. And we'll come back at 2:32 where Claire will give her presentation on federal changes and impacts. All right, so everybody in 5 minutes. Thank you. Now, so we're going to, all right, showing 2:32, so we're going to jump back into it. I went towards the end of 2:32 to give everybody a little bit more time. But I'm happy to introduce Claire to talk about our next topic, which is something that's come up in a lot of recent discussions. So we've had several requests for additional information on how various federal actions are impacting the healthcare ecosystem that OHP Bridge operates in. So in response to that, we've asked Claire Pierce-Warble, the Director of the Office of Health Policy, to join us today to discuss how, some recent federal actions are impacting Medicaid, Marketplace, and rural health. Again, we're requesting that OBAC members hold their questions till the end of the presentation. I will say I've seen part of this presentation previously, and there's a lot of great information, and Claire does a great job with it, so I'm excited to see what she gives us today. Claire, over to you.
Oh, Claire, we can't hear you.
How about now?
Yes, there we go.
Okay, great. All right, now I gotta remember what I said before. I think I was saying thank you for having me today. And as Mike said, I'll go through some of this content and then leave time for questions. And if folks have seen previously, we've done a number of presentations, OHA and our colleagues at ODHS, to the legislature and other bodies to explain the impacts of HR1, and pleased to be with you all today to discuss that in the context of OHP Bridge. Next slide. So I'll be covering our timeline, some of the key impact considerations and major areas of impact to the state. And then we'll walk through some of the OHP Bridge impacts and our communication and engagement plans. Next slide. This slide gives an overview of the various changes that we are anticipating or have already occurred since the passage of HR1. This kind of shows the fact that many of these things are going to be happening at the same time or impacting the same coverage years for folks across Marketplace and Medicaid. And so as the Oregon Health Authority, this is what we are paying attention to, and especially given the fact that OHP Bridge utilizes Medicaid systems and Marketplace rules. Some of these are kind of looking across these will be critical for our program, and especially as we anticipate the federal government to provide much more guidance on these areas where they have not, or that the statute doesn't specify explicitly enough. I will say on the next slides, I'm not going to touch on every part of this, but just those that are, again, most impactful and that we're setting up our own systems to manage most effectively. Just as a grounding point, I think as we're looking at the impact on the state of Oregon and all of the communities in the state, we recognize that there are a number of communities that are going to be impacted disproportionately. And so that's not just the changes on the health system and coverage side, but for instance, families and individuals that are impacted by changes to SNAP benefits as well. So we anticipate that will include rural residents, working families, people with disabilities, immigrants and refugees, families with mixed legal status, and caregivers to be among some of the communities that we need to be holding up and paying particular attention to when it comes to implementing these new changes. Next slide. So I will briefly mention some of the Medicaid work requirement changes. Again, these are not these do not pertain to basic health programs. Basic health programs are not mentioned in the statute related to work requirements, but just by way of background to understand what the state is working on for Medicaid, by the end of next year, 2026, the anticipation is that states establish a work requirement or community engagement program for individuals in the adult expansion group. There are explicit exceptions in the statute. Some of those are, I would say, explicit, and actually some of those are exceptions that will be further detailed by CMS guidance and rulemaking. The rulemaking that we expect for this program is actually not required. CMS is not required to issue that rulemaking until June of next year, which puts us into a little bit of a tricky spot, as I'll say on the next timeline or the next slide. A few other things just to mention before I go to that. This is a program that will need to be a partnership between OHA and ODHS, who manages our eligibility systems. And we'll be looking for opportunities to collaborate on program design across Medicaid and SNAP. There are also changes, as I mentioned on the SNAP side, there are already work requirements in place, but these rules and exceptions do not align, which makes it difficult from a systems perspective. And we anticipate that there will be a significant amount of IT system change work needed to ensure we are able to keep as many eligible individuals enrolled as possible. The other note here would just be to understand that the other changes impacting this population include changes to the redetermination timeline. So HR 1 requires that this expansion population be renewed every 6 months, which is different than currently under our waiver, where we have continuous eligibility on the Medicaid side for 2 years, and so that will be going away as well. Next slide. This is a just reference to the types of things that we are paying attention to and on what timeline. So we are thinking about work requirements and every other component of HR 1 implementation relevant to the current budget and biennium that we are in, as well as asks that we will need to make relevant to either budget or authority to implement these new federal requirements. We're expecting some guidance from the federal government, as I mentioned, related to CMS requirements and rulemaking. And we're also expecting and are already undertaking work to prioritize what system changes are needed to effectuate work requirements. Next slide. The other major area on the Medicaid side that we are working around are the eligibility changes. I already mentioned some of those to include the redetermination eligibility frequency increasing essentially fourfold from what we currently have. And the timeline for that will be associated with our 1115 waiver for continuous eligibility. So our waiver is scheduled to end in October. CMS has indicated they will not be extending waivers for continuous eligibility. And so that is when we expect this policy will go into effect in Oregon. We also expect cost sharing to be implemented for many adult members with some exceptions. There are also some other eligibility changes. I'll mention, for instance, retroactive coverage, which is currently at 90 days, and it will be reduced to between 30 or 60 days for retroactive coverage. So these are some of the key things that, again, have a system change impact, but have less, I would say, discretion for how the state implements. For the most part, these are just changing a date from 90 to 60 days in the system, or changing a copay amount, although that will be a larger system build given our current status. But these eligibility changes have less discretion when it comes to state implementation. Next slide. This will also show you some of the timeline that's relevant here, and the policy work that the state is undertaking in addition to the system change will be around amending our regulations to match the new federal mandates. Next slide. The other program I will speak to briefly before going into a little bit more specifics on where we see the impact on the marketplace and the basic health program. The Rural Health Transformation Fund is a non-recurring 5-year program overseen by CMS. So this was authorized under HR 1. It is intended to provide funding to all 50 states at a floor of $100 million per year annually for 5 years, starting technically this month, although we are in a funding a period of applying for the notice of funding opportunity. There's also a discretionary portion of that award. So the other half of available funding will be distributed by CMS based on metrics that are defined in the notice of funding opportunity that was published in September, as well as some specific, some of that will be essentially reviewing the merit of the application for the program. Others are more objective, related to, for instance, the rural population or rural health facilities in the state. So we are at least now planning on that 100 million or 500 over the course of the award period, and putting together a competitive application to hopefully receive more than that. The deadline for us to submit that application is November 5th, so we're really sprinting towards that. It's a very complex application to put together in a 6-week period of time. So to support us in doing that, and because that did not allow time for the type of community engagement that we would typically want to pursue, we did release a solicitation for public input in August to gather input on project ideas and help to frame the Rural Health Transformation Plan, which is a component of this application. We received a really great amount of feedback from the community, and we used that to frame our proposed initiatives that will be included in the state application. We then conducted community forums over the course of the past week. We did as well our tribal consultation and urban Indian program confer with tribes and NARA, and we are just completed a survey of those initiatives to collect additional feedback. So we have tried to build in throughout this process the ability to solicit ideas, even as it's a fairly short turnaround time. But then once we submit that application in November, we expect between our application being submitted and actually hearing back from CMS about the award, that there would be additional time for community engagement. And in fact, there will be lots of additional engagement once the award is ideally received, and we are starting to get those funds out into the community. Next slide. I think this is mostly just showing again in the timeline format what I've already said, but the one thing I would call out here on the policy and operations is that we are developing a proposal for this program that would allow the state to solicit proposals for funding once we know the amount of the award, and once we have received that feedback from CMS. We do expect there will be some negotiation based on what we submit, but that the funding would actually be distributed starting in calendar year 2026, after we are able to establish the program administration and solicit ideas and proposals for awards. Next slide. All right, switching gears, marketplace changes. So a couple of things just to point out on this slide. I think everyone is tracking that probably the most impactful change to the marketplace this year is the pending expiration of the enhanced premium tax credits. So that's not here, but I think is just important for us to keep in mind, as these other changes are potentially going to be happening on top of that funding or premium cliff for some folks. The other thing just to keep in mind with regards to the marketplace changes is that the state-based marketplace in Oregon is scheduled to launch next November. So some of these changes for coverage year 2026 are being implemented on healthcare.gov and don't actually require a state system change to effectuate that. And that is in some ways kind of minimizing the level of effort that we need to engage in to effectuate the changes. However, this obviously requires us to be really focused and dedicated to how we are communicating with communities and with consumers on the marketplace about some of these changes, and ensuring that we are providing the right information about the both changes to eligibility and some of the impacts to some of the costs or the tax credit repayment caps, et cetera. I will also note that we are pending litigation in terms of when some of these changes will go into effect. So that is noted here in with the asterisks. I won't go into those specifically, but just to know that some of these changes are not going into effect necessarily pending that litigation. The two other things I would just call out before we move on are in 2027, that's really where we expect to see in 2027, 2028, changes that do impact Oregon and consumers on the marketplace more broadly. In 2027, in addition to changes in eligibility where refugees and asylees will no longer be eligible to receive premium tax credits, there will also be a shortened open enrollment window. And that is something that we know is going to make it challenging to ensure that we're enrolling as many consumers as typically enroll with the current enrollment period. We know that we get a lot of signups towards the end of that enrollment period, and so the communications and outreach is going to be really critical. And then in 2028, ending automatic re-enrollment means that about a third of marketplace enrollees who currently auto re-enroll in Oregon will need to actually go through the verification process year over year to make those changes. So just some roadblocks essentially being put up for consumers to engage with the marketplace. Next slide. I think I've mostly talked through all of this, but another good timeline slide for reference. Next slide. So let's get to specifics on OHP Bridge. So I mentioned at the top that HR 1 does not explicitly extend any of these provisions to state basic health programs, although the way that the program is financed is implicated. It's unclear, for instance, whether CMS has authority or intends to extend any of the Medicaid provisions to BHP. But also, as I noted, given that we operate the OHP Bridge on the Medicaid infrastructure, there's indirectly some BHP impact and kind of decisions and system bills that need to be carried out with that in mind. HR 1 also affects BHP funding by eliminating the tax credit eligibility for some groups of currently eligible folks. So some non-citizens would also not be eligible for BHP, given that that's how the eligibility is set for the funding for the basic health program. And then finally, just the, again, elephant in the room here is that given that HR 1 didn't extend the marketplace tax credits, the expiration of those enhanced premium tax credits also reduces BHP funding. Next slide. This just gets into a little bit more detail, kind of line by line on some of those provisions I mentioned, which do not have an explicit application to BHP, but we've noted here where if those were applied to the basic health program, what would essentially be the impact. So in terms of new administrative barriers to Medicaid enrollment, like more frequent reporting and work requirements, that would add system costs and would likely drive up our per member costs. I will just reiterate for the third time that there's nothing in the law and nothing that we've heard yet that is hinting at extending these policies to BHP, but things we just need to keep in mind if the federal government has the authority and decides to move in that direction. Similarly, Medicaid cost sharing, the question here is around whether CMS could regulate and apply such requirements to BHP. And then similarly, the payment restrictions for certain gender-affirming care services and Planned Parenthood clinics, given that it's not explicit in the law, we would continue to look to CMS rulemaking either in their annual payment notices or otherwise around what restrictions might be applied to BHP as well. Next slide. Sorry, I was skipping ahead one. I think this may say the same thing. Or just goes into a little bit more, sorry about that. I was skipping ahead. So I think this slide just provides a little bit more detail around how that tax credit eligibility is changing for certain non-citizens and when. So specifically, the tax credit eligibility for otherwise eligible non-citizens who have income below 100% of the federal poverty level and are ineligible for Medicaid due to their citizenship status. So this is going into effect at the beginning of next year. And then additionally, removing the tax credit eligibility for certain groups of non-citizens would go into effect in 2027. We expect that the elimination of these tax credits and the eligibility for these groups would then prevent Oregon from receiving BHP funds for those non-citizens that are subject to the new restrictions. This is a kind of secondary impact, I would say, to the changes to the marketplace, given how BHP is funded as a pass-through of those funds to the BHP program instead. Next slide. I think this is the final slide. So I just wanted to share before we get into discussion here that we are, as an agency and with our partners at the Oregon Department of Human Services, are working hand in hand, especially around communications and engagement, given what I said at the top, that we know that a lot of these changes are impacting the same individuals and families and communities in Oregon. And so we need to be really in lockstep with how we are communicating and offering support and assistance through these transitions. We are doing regular partner webinars. We are providing regular updates in committees such as this, but also specifically in the Medicaid Advisory Committee, the Beneficiary Advisory Committee, and in the HIMAC, which we were on earlier today. We are also doing intentional partner and member engagement. And my cat would like to say hi as well, on work requirements and on the Rural Health Transformation Program, as I mentioned, and 6-month redetermination. So we expect that will be kind of engagements that are happening on a rolling basis as we are setting up our systems to implement the programs. But we're really at, I would say, an early stage of getting all of those work streams up and running. We've presented to the legislature and looking for figuring out what the resources and budgets are for this implementation, and then we'll have more specific opportunities. But in the meantime, those committees are where we expect to provide updates. And also continue to post updates to our federal response planning page, both at OHA and ODHS. So where there are relevant updates as well, we'd be posting them on our website. So we have information available in different formats. I think that is the end of the prepared slides, and I see there's a hand up, so happy to answer any questions.
Did you say that there is a work requirement currently or that there will be for a person to receive Medicaid or Bridge program?
There is currently a work requirement for SNAP. There will be a work requirement for Medicaid, and there is no anticipated work requirement for OHP Bridge.
Oh, interesting. Okay, got it.
Great question, Kelly. And piggybacking off of that, Claire, can you kind of walk through or explain a little bit the difference between the workforce requirement and then the continuous eligibility, and then after the waiver is done? I'm trying to figure out how that plays apart with one another. It's just I'm trying to figure out if the work requirement goes into effect January 1, and then 10 months later, then you have the continuous eligibility ending. How does eligibility work in that time frame and before?
It's a great question, and these are the types of questions that our team is kind of grappling with right now to understand how all of these changes layer on top of each other, with the added complication of the waiver kind of providing a different kind of start period. So I can't answer that very specifically, besides to say that there's a need to align those programs, and there's a need to kind of understand what the data would be, for instance, that the state's already collecting to essentially automatically verify that folks have met the work requirement, for instance. We are seeking, I would say, in every part of this to minimize the additional burden that's placed on eligible Medicaid beneficiaries, so that we're trying to where there's a lot of essentially red tape added with these new requirements, that we're doing as much work as possible on the front end to keep people enrolled if they're eligible. So I think this is the type of thing where we'd be happy to come back and do more presentations once we have some of that information more clearly defined with regards to kind of the overlapping eligibility time periods and review periods. And I would say some of that will be dependent on how the federal government provides us with that guidance so that we can understand how the state rules will apply accordingly.
All right, thanks, Claire. Okay, I see your hand is up. I don't know that's from before if you wanted to take it down. Okay. Any other comments or questions for Claire? I know she had a hard stop at 3, but I don't know if there's maybe another question or two that anybody has related to her presentation. All right.
Well, if not, hopefully, yeah, you know where to find me, and happy to kind of come back and provide regular updates and make sure that we're getting anything out more specifically to this group on additional engagement opportunities.
Great. Thank you very much, Claire. Appreciate your presentation and all the information that you gave. All right. So before we jump to the community engagement piece that's next on the agenda, I do have some good news. So Eduardo, I think Josie might have some information for you. So I'll turn it over to Josie.
Yep. So this was just a quick follow-up on the question that was asked before on the approximate number of leavers and leavers that transitioned to Medicaid. So on average, in the analysis timeframe, there were approximately 1,700 leavers each month, and then approximately 800 of those transitioned directly to Medicaid. Obviously, the numbers will shift if our enrollment changes, but that was the average for the first year of the program.
Thank you very much, Josie. All right, so I will now turn it over to Katie to give us some community engagement updates. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mike. And I will go ahead and drop some links in the chat that you're going to see on the screen as well, so you have easy access to them. If you ever lose these, you can also go back to our website and look in the slide deck, and the links will be available there as well. But this is another reoccurring segment in our meetings every time round. It's just a place for us to provide some opportunities for you to engage in with OHP Bridge in different ways. These are generally open to both OBAC members and non-OBAC members. So if you're a member of the public attending with us today, this is a great section for you as well. We can go on to the next slide. So one of the things that I promised to circle back to was the new OHP Bridge rules that I flagged earlier on in today's meeting. So again, these rules are just a minor revision to make sure that the annual income limits for our OHP Bridge program align with those federal regulations that govern all basic health programs. So if you would like to learn more about these, there's a link posted here on the screen, and it is also in the chat for the notice of proposed rulemaking. And this outlines what the changes are, as well as when the public hearing and public comment periods are for those rule changes. So if you take a look at that notice of proposed rulemaking and you have some thoughts or feedback on the edits, you can submit public comment on those rules with your feedback between November 1 and November 21st. So there's a 3-week period coming up next month where you can provide that feedback. So we can go to the next slide and I'll chat a bit more about that. So if you do take a look at that that notice of proposed rulemaking and you have thoughts and feelings on it and would like to provide feedback, you can do that a couple ways. One, you can email Emily Burnett. She's the person who's leading those rule changes, and you can send her an email with that feedback. You can also attend the virtual public hearing that will be happening on November 18th from 11 to 11:45 in the morning. And if you would like that Zoom link and meeting information, it's will be found in that notice of proposed rulemaking that was posted before. And again, the link that's there in the chat. And you can attend and provide your feedback verbally on the Zoom call. You can also provide written testimony via snail mail if you, like me, are also a huge fan of USPS. You can send a written letter to Emily and Christy at the address on screen. So just an opportunity there if you're interested in that particular set of rule changes, a couple different ways for you to provide feedback. You can go to the next slide. Additionally, this is less of a community engagement, but more just for community awareness. As Claire mentioned in her presentation, we do have a federal policy tracking website that covers a number of key areas that folks are interested in and that impact our communities. And it outlines kind of what the federal changes are and how OHA is responding to those changes. So again, that link is in the chat and on the screen. It's a great resource for you to have yourself as well as share with friends, family, community members that are interested. It's just a great thing to have up on your amongst your tabs. If like me, you have dozens and dozens of tabs, it's a good one to have amongst those. So we can go to the next slide. And lastly, we try to flag this one at every meeting. We do have an avenue for our community partners and assisters to ask questions. There's a couple different ways that you can submit a question to our team. One is through the Office of Community Engagement and or Community Health and Engagement, also known as OCHE, used to be called CPOP, through your regional outreach coordinator. You can also submit a question through the OHP Bridge email. One thing I do want to note about this email is that it is intended for our community partners and assisters. It's not a space for members to reach out with individual questions on your account or your coverage. Helping folks navigate their one system account and application and whatnot is a specialized skill set that our team does not have. So we want to make sure that you're able to get the correct help for that. And that would be through our through community assisters and navigators, as well as through the one system helpline. So if you are asking questions about your specific case, you'll get an auto response and it'll include all the contact information for those folks. However, if you are a community partner or sister, you can submit your question through that email. Additionally, you can attend the Oregon Health News Monthly webinar that happens every month, and there will be more information on that on the next slide. And regardless of how you submit your question, we will compile all of the questions that are sent to us in a given month, and we will provide answers to them in the next month's webinar. And then following the publishing of those at that webinar, we will follow up in writing with folks that have submitted questions. So you can go to the next slide. So as I mentioned, those webinars are hosted virtually, and they're a space for ODHS, or the Oregon Department of Human Services, and the Oregon Health Authority, or OHA, to share the latest information and updates regarding health coverage and other benefits in Oregon. So it's a great resource. I highly recommend people register and attend. It is offered in both English and Spanish. The English version is provided on the second Tuesday of each month from 1 to 2 p.m. And the Spanish language version is offered on the fourth Thursday from 2 to 3 p.m. And the registration links are online or on this slide deck. And those, again, are posted in the slide deck on the website. So access those there. I think we can go to our next slide. I think I hand it back to you, Mike.
Thank you, Katie. So we're near the end. So before we close today's meeting, I do have a few reminders. First, if you would like to sign up to provide public testimony at next quarter's OBAC meeting, or if your community partner or sister with a question about OHP Bridge, please reach out to the email that we need to put on the screen or in the chat. Secondly, if you'd like to sign up for the OHP Bridge mailing list to receive updates and announcements related to OHP Bridge and the OHP Bridge Advisory Committee, You can do so again at the links that have been provided. You can find out more about the OBAC, including its meeting times, meeting links, and meeting material. There we go. Meeting materials at the OBAC website using the link shown on the screen. Lastly, as a reminder, quarterly cadence now. So our next meeting is on January 15th from 1 to 4 p.m. You can find the Zoom link for that meeting on the screen, as well as the rest of the 2026 meetings on the OBAC website. Thank you all again for attending this quarterly OBAC Bridge Advisory Committee meeting. But before I close, I'm going to turn it back over to Katie for any final announcements.
Great, thanks, Mike. And I think we can go to the last slide. So also apologies, I dropped the links in a direct message. I had forgot to reset to everyone, so they should be available to everyone now. And as Mike said, our next meeting is on January 15th. I will stay on this call for an extra couple minutes for folks to copy and paste those links if they would like. But otherwise, just a huge thank you to everyone for attending today, for all of our speakers. And one last huge welcome to our new members and welcome back to our reoccurring and our renewing and continuing members. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thanks, everybody.